Section 1. The calm before the chaos. When my wife and I bought the old farmhouse on the edge of Willow Creek, we thought we were buying peace. The kind of quiet where mornings started with birdsong instead of car horns, and evenings ended with the soft rustle of wind through pine trees. The house sat at the edge of the HOA's jurisdiction, technically part of the community, but distant enough that we didn't think we'd ever have to deal with the board's usual nonsense. We were wrong. Our daughter, Lily, was 7 at the time, bright, curious, and brave despite the challenges life had thrown her way. She was born with cerebral palsy and used leg braces to walk. Every step she took was proof of her strength. Her smile could light up a room, and she had this way of finding beauty in everything, even the weeds growing by the fence. That summer had started beautifully. Lily's therapy sessions were going well, and our neighbor Daniel, who worked as a physical therapist, had volunteered to help her practice walking up and down the gentle slope of our driveway. The air smelled of rain and pine sap, and everything felt steady, safe. Then, as with most stories like ours, Karen entered the picture. Her name was Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the Willow Creek HOA. She was the kind of person who believed that a title on a clipboard made her the ruler of everyone else's life. From the moment she saw us moving in, she treated us like intruders. I remember the first time she came by. She stood at the end of our driveway, hands on her hips, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, unmoving in the breeze. She said, her voice syrupy with fake politeness, "Our HOA has very strict rules about modifications to visible property lines. That ramp isn't approved." I glanced at the small wooden ramp by our porch, the one we built for Lily's wheelchair. "It's not permanent," I told her calmly. "It's just for accessibility." She frowned as if the word accessibility offended her. "Temporary or not, it's unsightly. You'll need to remove it or submit a formal design review." That was the beginning. From there, the complaints rolled in like clockwork. The non-standard mailbox that was actually identical to everyone else's, the unapproved landscaping, which consisted of wildflowers Lily had planted, and even the noise disturbance from her therapy sessions. Karen filed a report for every petty thing, and somehow the rest of the board always backed her up. At first, I tried to be patient. We'd moved here for peace, not war. But patience only works when the other side is reasonable, and Karen thrived on power. One evening, I found her standing at the edge of our property again, clipboard in hand, glaring as Daniel helped Lily down the driveway. "You can't use the road like that," she snapped. "It's private property. Liability risk." Daniel looked up, sweat glistening on his brow. "It's a public access lane, ma'am. She's not in anyone's way." Karen's lips curled. "You don't make the rules here." "I do." I stepped forward, forcing calm into my voice. "You don't make the rules for my daughter's therapy either. We're not breaking any law." Her eyes flicked toward me, cold and calculating. "We'll see about that." That night, I got an email from the HOA citing safety violations and threatening a fine if we continued using the driveway for unauthorized activities. I almost laughed, but then I saw how worried Lily looked when I told her we might have to stop her exercises. "Did I do something bad?" she asked. I knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart. You did everything right. Some people just don't understand." She nodded, thoughtful. "Then we'll help them understand." Her optimism was disarming. I wish the world was as kind as she believed it to be. For a few weeks, things went quiet. Karen must have been busy tormenting someone else, because we didn't hear a peep from her, not until that gray afternoon in late September. It had been raining lightly all morning, the kind of drizzle that made the road slick, but not dangerous. Daniel had just wrapped up a therapy session when Lily insisted on showing me how far she could walk from the porch to the gate without help. I stood at the end of the drive, cheering her on, when I noticed Karen's silver SUV idling by the intersection. She was watching. At first, I thought nothing of it, just her usual nosiness, but when she suddenly accelerated, swerving to turn into the lane faster than needed, my heart leapt into my throat. The tires screeched as she braked too hard, stopping just short of the gate. The noise startled Lily, who stumbled slightly, catching herself with her braces. Karen jumped out, waving her hands dramatically. This is exactly what I meant. Dangerous behavior. What if she'd been in the road? She wasn't, I said, voice shaking. You were the one speeding. Karen's tone sharpened. Don't accuse me of that. I have dashcam footage. You're endangering your child, not me. It took everything in me not to shout. Go home, Karen. She huffed, climbed back into her car, and drove off, but not before taking a picture of the ramp again. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules or safety. This was personal. Over the next few days, she ramped up her campaign, no pun intended. She sent out newsletters calling for community accountability, clearly aimed at us, and even convinced 2 board members to do inspections of our home while we were out. I caught them once, snooping around our front yard, pretending to measure the slope of the driveway. Something inside me snapped that day. I called the HOA office, demanded a formal review, and started documenting everything: photos, videos, even timestamps of every encounter. Daniel offered to testify if things escalated. He'd seen it all too. But deep down, I knew Karen wouldn't stop until she had a real scene to exploit, something she could twist into her own narrative. And sure enough, she got exactly that chance one stormy afternoon, when her recklessness crossed a line so severe it would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire HOA. Section 2. The day it all fell apart the morning of the accident began like any other: gray skies, low thunder rumbling in the distance, and the air heavy with the smell of rain-soaked pine. The weather forecast had warned of a storm moving through Willow Creek by noon, so I planned to keep Lily indoors after breakfast. She never liked thunder, and her leg braces always felt heavier when the weather turned damp. But Lily had other ideas. Just 5 minutes outside, Dad, she pleaded, pressing her nose to the window. I want to see the rain start. Her voice was soft but determined, the kind that always made me give in. So I helped her into her raincoat, grabbed an umbrella, and together we stepped out onto the porch. The drizzle was steady but light, and the sound of raindrops hitting the old tin roof was oddly calming. Daniel, our neighbor, waved from across the street. Therapy tomorrow, not today, right? Yeah, I called back. Just a short walk before it pours. He smiled and headed inside. If only he'd stayed outside a few minutes longer. Lily took slow, careful steps down the ramp, clutching the wooden railing. The air had that eerie stillness that comes right before a storm truly breaks, the world hushed, expectant. She reached the end of the ramp and turned toward the driveway, grinning. Look, Daddy, no hands. I laughed, though nerves fluttered in my chest. Okay, just be careful, champ. That's when I heard the engine. A loud, growling rev from the main road beyond the trees. The kind of reckless sound you instantly know doesn't belong in a quiet neighborhood. I turned my head just in time to see a silver SUV, Karen's SUV, barreling down the lane far too fast for the wet pavement. My stomach dropped. Lily, stay where you are. I shouted, running toward her. But the wheels of Karen's vehicle hit a puddle, hydroplaning slightly. The car swerved, not much, but enough to send it fishtailing toward the edge of our driveway. Karen tried to correct the steering, but her tires caught the gravel, spinning the SUV sideways. The next few seconds moved in slow motion. The tires screamed, water sprayed, and then impact. The side mirror clipped the corner of our wooden gate, splintering it. The force of the collision sent debris flying, one shard catching Lily on the temple as she tried to turn away. She fell backward onto the wet ground, her leg braces twisting awkwardly beneath her. Lily! I sprinted forward, heart hammering. The rain came harder now, mixing with the thin line of blood trickling down her cheek. Her small hands trembled, and tears mixed with the rain on her face. It hurts, Daddy, she whispered. I dropped to my knees beside her, trying to stay calm. It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you. You're okay. Karen's SUV had come to a stop halfway up the lane, her tires sunk into the muddy grass. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at us through the windshield. Then, unbelievably, she stepped out, umbrella in hand, as if nothing serious had happened. What were you doing letting her stand in the road? She snapped. My vision blurred with anger. Are you insane? You nearly hit my daughter. Karen's face hardened. I was driving well below the limit. If she'd been where she's supposed to be, on her property, this wouldn't have happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter was lying on the ground bleeding, and this woman was trying to make her the problem. Call 911. I barked. Karen folded her arms. There's no need for that. It's a minor scrape. Don't overreact. Call 911. I roared. Something in my voice must have startled her because she finally fumbled for her phone. I pulled mine from my pocket and called anyway, giving our address through gritted teeth. Within minutes, Daniel came running from his house, his eyes going wide when he saw Lily on the ground. Oh my God, what happened? She hit the gate. I stammered. Lily got caught in it. Daniel knelt beside her, checking her pulse, keeping her conscious. Hang in there, sweetheart. You're okay. The wail of sirens soon filled the air, growing louder with each heartbeat. But while I was focused on my daughter, Karen was busy performing. When the paramedics arrived, she intercepted them first. She darted out suddenly, she said, voice trembling with well-rehearsed concern. I tried to stop. There was nothing I could do. My jaw dropped. That's not what happened. One of the EMTs gave me a sharp look. Sir, please step back, we'll handle this. Karen sniffled dramatically, clutching her chest. I was just coming back from the HOA office. I told him that driveway was unsafe for children. I warned them. Warned us? The nerve of her. The paramedics loaded Lily onto a stretcher, carefully bracing her leg. She was conscious but pale, eyes wide with fear. Daddy, don't let her come near me, she whispered weakly. I squeezed her hand. She won't, baby. I promise. As the ambulance drove off, Karen turned to me, her tone icy again. You'll be hearing from the board. I'm filing an official complaint for negligence. I was stunned silent. You caused this. But she'd already turned her back, pretending to inspect her cracked mirror. That night at the hospital, the doctor told us Lily had suffered a mild concussion and a fractured leg. Her braces had bent under the impact, leaving deep bruises where the straps dug into her skin. My wife, Emma, cried quietly as she held our daughter's hand, whispering prayers. I sat there, numb, watching the rain streak the hospital window. Every drop felt like another heartbeat of rage. Karen didn't even check in. Instead, she sent an email to the entire neighborhood blaming us for the incident. In her version, Lily had run out into the path of her vehicle, and the HOA needed to consider restricting unsafe child play near driveways. By morning, the story had spread like wildfire. Some neighbors sent sympathetic messages, but others, those who always sided with Karen, started murmuring about reckless parenting. I wanted to scream. The next day, as I picked up the bent pieces of our gate, Daniel walked over holding his phone. You're not going to believe this, he said. My security camera caught the whole thing. He showed me the footage. Karen's SUV clearly speeding, the loss of control, the impact, everything. My stomach twisted with both relief and fury. She's done, I said, my voice cold. This time, she doesn't get to twist the truth. Daniel nodded grimly. You're taking this to court, right? Court. I said, I'm taking this to the police. And that was exactly what I did. But I had no idea how deep Karen's connections ran, or how far the HOA would go to protect her. Because, as I would soon find out, the truth didn't matter to people who believed they were untouchable. Section 3. The cover-up begins the morning after the accident. I woke up to a different kind of storm, not the thunder outside, but the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. Dozens of messages, missed calls, and emails poured in from neighbors and HOA members. Some were sympathetic, but most were disturbingly cold. Hope your daughter's okay, one message read, but maybe she shouldn't be playing near the street. Another was worse. If you're going to make accusations against Karen, be ready to back them up. She's on the safety committee. I sat there in the hospital's family room, gripping my phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Safety committee. The irony almost made me laugh if I hadn't wanted to scream. Emma, who hadn't slept a wink, looked up from Lily's bedside. They're blaming her again, aren't they? I nodded silently. Of course they are, she muttered bitterly. Karen's their golden child. HOA president, community organizer, queen of fake smiles. Lily stirred slightly, her arm hooked to and fore. Her face was pale, the side of her head wrapped in gauze. The sight of her like that reignited the fire in my chest. I have the footage, I said. Daniel's camera caught everything. I'm going to the police. Emma's eyes met mine. Do it, but be careful. I didn't understand what she meant until later. At the police station, Officer Rayburn, a heavy-set man with a thinning mustache and a voice like gravel, sat across from me, expression unreadable. I handed him a USB drive with the video. Dash cam or door cam? He asked. Door cam. My neighbor recorded it. He plugged it in, watched a few seconds, then leaned back. That's pretty clear, he admitted. She was going too fast. So, you'll charge her? I asked, hope flickering in my chest. He sighed. Well, that's the thing. It's a private neighborhood, right? HOA managed road. Enforcement jurisdiction can get complicated. My jaw dropped. Complicated? She hit my gate. My daughter's in the hospital. Rayburn scratched his chin. I'm not saying nothing can be done. Just these HOA communities, they've got their own security policies. Karen's husband's on the township board too, right? That name, Karen's husband, hit like a rock. I'd forgotten about him. Tom Hargrove, a real estate attorney and one of those people who seem to have his fingers in every pie. Are you telling me you can't do anything because her husband's connected? Rayburn shifted uncomfortably. I'll file a report. I'll get the footage logged. But just don't expect this to move fast. In other words, don't expect justice at all. I walked out of that station feeling like I'd stepped into quicksand. By the time I got home, the HOA had already struck. A bright yellow envelope sat taped to my mailbox, a notice of violation. Homeowner has erected an unsafe gate structure obstructing community traffic flow. Failure to comply will result in fines and further disciplinary action by the board. I crumpled the paper in my fist, rage boiling over. Unsafe gate? The gate that Karen's SUV destroyed? That night, Daniel stopped by again. You're not going to believe this, he said, holding out his phone. Karen just posted in the community forum. The post read, "It's been a hard week, everyone. Please drive safely, especially with careless children playing near roads." I'm shaken, but grateful no one was seriously hurt. We'll be discussing new safety rules at next week's HOA meeting. Hundreds of comments flooded beneath it, all praising her for her kindness and composure. Only a few dared to question her story. Those comments vanished within an hour. She's deleting anything that disagrees with her, Daniel said, disgusted. She's running damage control. I slammed my fist against the counter. She's not getting away with this. Emma came in, holding Lily's stuffed bear. Honey, don't make it worse, she said softly. They'll just twist it again. I turned toward her, my voice low. They already did. 2 days later, I attended the HOA meeting. The community hall was packed, the air thick, with whispered gossip and fake civility. Karen sat at the head table in her navy blazer, her SUV keychain resting proudly in front of her like a trophy. As soon as I walked in, the room went quiet. I could feel their eyes on me, measuring, judging, deciding whether I was the villain or the victim. Karen cleared her throat. Before we begin, I'd like to address the unfortunate incident involving the Henderson family. Unfortunate incident. That's what she called it. I understand emotions are high, she continued smoothly, but we must all remember to prioritize safety. Children must not play near roadways. The HOA is not liable for accidents resulting from negligence. I shot to my feet. Negligence? My daughter was on our driveway. You were speeding. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen smiled tightly, pretending to keep her composure. Mr. Henderson, please. This isn't the place for personal attacks. Then where is? I demanded. Because your lies have gone far enough. Daniel stood too, his phone raised. I have the footage, he said loudly, and it shows everything. You swerved into their property. You hit that gate. A murmur spread across the room. Karen's expression faltered for a fraction of a second before she regained her cool. If there's footage, by all means provide it to the HOA legal team, she said smoothly. We'll review it. But we all knew what that meant. Once the footage was in their hands, it would mysteriously vanish. I'll be giving it to the police, Daniel said sharply. Karen's smile froze. And in that silence, that tight, brittle moment, I realized she wasn't just afraid of exposure. She was terrified of losing control. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Henderson, the voice said, this is Officer Rayburn again. There's been a development. My pulse quickened. What kind? Well, he said carefully, the HOA's attorney reached out. They're claiming the video violates privacy laws because it was recorded on private property. They're asking us to dismiss it. I felt my blood run cold. You can't be serious. I'm just telling you what's on the record, he replied. But off the record, you might want to talk to someone higher up. Maybe the DA's office. The line went dead. Emma came into the room, her face pale. What is it? They're trying to bury it, I said flatly. But I'm not letting them. Because at that moment, it wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about every smug, entitled person who thought power could erase truth. And I was done playing by their rules. Section 4. The truth breaks through the next morning. I drove to the district attorney's office with the USB drive in my pocket and exhaustion in my bones. Lily was still recovering in the hospital, Emma barely holding herself together. Every time I looked at my daughter's bruised face, I felt the same fury return, sharp, relentless, and ice-cold. When I reached the front desk, the receptionist gave me a polite but weary look. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But I need to speak with someone about a case the local police aren't handling properly. She started to tell me they were busy, but before she could finish, a man in a gray suit walked by, tall, late 40s, with the kind of presence that filled a room. His badge identified him as Assistant District Attorney Mark Dyer. He stopped when he heard the word HOA. Excuse me, he said, turning toward me. Did you say something about a homeowners association? Yes, I replied, relieved. One of their members, their president, caused an accident that injured my disabled daughter. The police are stalling. I have footage proving it. He gestured toward his office. Let's take a look. Inside, I handed him the drive. Dyer plugged it into his computer, watched for maybe 20 seconds, then leaned back in his chair, frowning. She's clearly over the speed limit, he said, and that's your property line she crosses. I nodded, my hands shaking slightly. The HOA is calling it negligence. They're saying the video violates privacy laws. Dyer gave a short, humorless laugh. That's not how privacy law works. They're bluffing, trying to intimidate you. Can you do something? I asked. He nodded. Absolutely. But I'll need formal statements from you, your wife, and your neighbor. I'll also need a copy of the HOA bylaws. If they're obstructing an investigation, that's a whole different story. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. That afternoon, I stopped by Daniel's house. He was already waiting with 2 mugs of coffee and a look that said he'd been thinking about the same thing. You're not going to believe this, he said, sliding his laptop around. I got a message from someone named Mark Dyer. Said he's with the DA's office. I smiled for the first time in a while. He's real. I met him this morning. Daniel grinned. Good, because Karen just started deleting HOA records from the community website. Meeting notes, budgets, everything. She's covering her tracks. She knows something's coming, I said quietly. Let's make sure she's right. We gathered every bit of evidence we could, screenshots of her posts, timestamps of deleted messages, even witness statements from neighbors who'd seen her speeding before. By nightfall, we'd built a case strong enough to make even the most corrupt HOA nervous. 2 days later, Dyer called. We've opened a preliminary investigation, he said. I've also reached out to the local police department. They're cooperating now. Now, I asked. Let's just say a few phone calls were made, he replied dryly. You'll want to attend tomorrow's HOA meeting. I've arranged for a surprise guest. I didn't ask who. I just showed up. The next evening, the community center was packed tighter than ever. Karen sat at her usual spot, perfect hair, perfect posture, that smug smile that had haunted me for weeks. She was in control again, or so she thought. Before we begin, she announced, I'd like to address false rumors circulating about last week's unfortunate event. Her voice dripped with false sympathy. It's hurtful that some people would exploit a child's accident to attack the HOA. We all need to move on, and the door opened. A man in a gray suit entered, flanked by a uniformed officer. The room went dead silent. Karen blinked. Can I help you? Assistant District Attorney Mark Dyer, he said, holding up his badge. I'm here regarding the incident on Maple Lane. Karen's expression cracked, just a hairline fracture, but it was there. This is a private meeting, she said tightly. Actually, Dyer replied, this meeting falls under public community regulation per your HOA charter. That means legal oversight applies. I'm here on behalf of the Henderson family. A few gasps rippled through the room. I stood up slowly. You were saying, Karen? She glared at me, her composure faltering. This is outrageous. That footage violates. Dyer held up a hand. The footage is lawful and admissible. We've confirmed the property boundary and timestamp. And more concerning, several community files appear to have been deleted from your official records within the last 48 hours. Whispers filled the room. The board members exchanged nervous looks. Karen tried to laugh. I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe a technical glitch? Dyer leaned forward. We'll let the forensics team decide that. For a long moment, she said nothing. The sound of rain outside was the only thing breaking the silence. Then, with her voice trembling slightly, she tried one last card. This entire situation is a misunderstanding. That family has been hostile toward me for months. Dyer interrupted again, his tone sharper now. Ma'am, I'd advise you to stop talking unless you want to add obstruction to your list of charges. The color drained from her face. After the meeting, Dyer turned to me and Emma. We'll be issuing a subpoena for the HOA's records, he said. I can't promise immediate results, but this is no longer a neighborhood squabble. It's a criminal inquiry. Emma looked at him, eyes tired but grateful. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded. You're doing the right thing. People like her rely on fear to stay powerful. Don't give her that. Outside, the rain had stopped. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. But the fight wasn't over, not yet. Because the next morning, a letter arrived in our mailbox. Notice of legal action. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association intends to pursue defamation claims against the Henderson family for spreading false information that damages the community's reputation. Emma's hands trembled as she read it. They're suing us? I took the paper and looked out at the gray sky. No, I said coldly. They're trying to scare us. I glanced at Lily's wheelchair parked near the window, the small pink blanket folded across it, and something inside me hardened completely. They started this, I said, but we're going to finish it. Section 5, Judgment Day, the defamation notice sat on our kitchen counter like a threat wrapped in paper. A final, desperate move from people who'd run out of excuses. But fear was no longer in the equation. Not after what they'd done. Not after the weeks of lies, manipulation, and cruelty. By then, the state attorney's office had launched an official inquiry into the Willow Creek HOA. The charges listed on the paperwork were staggering: obstruction of justice, falsification of community records, and reckless endangerment. Karen's name appeared in bold letters under primary suspect. Still, she didn't back down. If anything, she became even louder, sending newsletters to the entire neighborhood insisting she was the victim of a smear campaign. Her husband, Tom, appeared on her porch every evening, arguing on speakerphone with reporters, lawyers, and anyone who would listen. But the tide was turning. One morning, Daniel knocked on my door, a triumphant grin plastered on his face. Turn on Channel 5, he said. I grabbed the remote and flipped the TV on. The local news anchor's voice came through. Breaking tonight, new developments in the Willow Creek HOA investigation. Court documents reveal that President Karen Hargrove is under review for tampering with evidence related to an accident that left a disabled child injured. Prosecutors allege that community records were deliberately deleted to mislead authorities. A photo of Karen flashed on the screen, her usual polished smile, but now it looked brittle and hollow. Emma gasped softly, covering her mouth. "It's really happening." I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, it's finally catching up to her. A week later, the subpoenas went out. Karen's computer, her phone, even her HOA-issued tablet, all seized. When the investigators discovered that she'd been editing board meeting minutes after the fact, it was the final nail in her coffin. Meanwhile, the neighbors who once worshipped her started to distance themselves. Some even came by to apologize. "I didn't know how bad it was," said Mrs. Green from across the street, wringing her hands. "She told us your daughter ran into the road. We believed her." I wanted to stay angry, but when I saw the shame in her eyes, I just sighed. "You believe what you want to believe," I said quietly, "but the truth always comes out." By early spring, the court date arrived. I'll never forget walking into that courtroom. The sterile air, the rows of polished benches, the sound of rain faintly pattering against the windows. Lily sat beside Emma in her wheelchair, a small cast still visible around her leg. She clutched her stuffed bear tightly, her brave little eyes scanning the room. Karen was there too, of course, dressed in her usual blazer, chin lifted high. But her confidence looked forced, the kind of performance that only fools the person giving it. Her husband sat beside her, face red and jaw clenched. The prosecutor began by playing Daniel's video. The whole courtroom watched as Karen's SUV sped down the wet lane, fishtailed, and struck the gate. You could hear Lily's scream faintly through the rain. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Karen's attorney stood and tried to spin the narrative, claiming the video didn't show the whole picture, that the speed couldn't be accurately determined, that Lily's position on the driveway made it an unforeseeable accident. But when Mark Dyer stood to respond, his words cut through the courtroom like steel. "Accidents happen," he said, "but cover-ups don't." Mrs. Hargrove didn't just make a mistake, she lied about it. She weaponized her authority, tampered with community records, and attempted to shift blame onto a disabled child. That is not an accident. That is abuse of power. Even Karen's husband shifted uncomfortably at that. When it was my turn to testify, my hands trembled as I took the oath. I spoke about Lily, her therapy, her courage, the way she smiled even when her braces hurt. I described the moment of the crash, the fear, the helplessness. And then I told the court about the email Karen sent, afterward the one blaming us. As I read it aloud, I caught a glimpse of her face. For the first time, she looked afraid. Not angry, not smug, just afraid. By the end of the trial, the judge's verdict was clear. Karen was found guilty of reckless endangerment and obstruction of justice. She was fined heavily, removed from her HOA position, and sentenced to 6 months of probation with community service, a punishment that felt poetic when I later heard she'd been assigned to clean public parks in the very town she once controlled. The HOA itself faced an audit, revealing years of financial mismanagement. Within months, the Willow Creek Board was dissolved and replaced with a volunteer committee, one that actually listened to residents. And as for us, we finally had peace. The summer that followed was quiet. Lily's leg healed slowly but steadily, and soon she was back to her physical therapy, stronger than ever. Every morning, she'd wheel herself out to the porch to watch the sunrise, her stuffed bear sitting proudly in her lap. One day she looked up at me and said, "Daddy, are the bad people gone?" I knelt beside her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "They are, sweetheart," I said softly. "They can't hurt anyone anymore." She smiled, small but real. "Then can we go to the lake again?" "Of course," I said, my throat tight. This time, nothing's stopping us. As we sat there together, the breeze warm and the world finally calm, I realized something important. Justice hadn't just punished Karen, it had freed us from the fears she represented. People like her thrive on control, on intimidation. But once you take that away, once you stand your ground and shine a light on their lies, they lose all their power. In the end, Karen didn't just lose her job, she lost the illusion that she could control everyone around her. And for the first time since that rainy day, I felt peace wash over me. Not the kind that comes from revenge, but the kind that comes from truth finally finally winning.